looking for positivity or looking for encouragement, Temia Brinson aims to educate you, to give you the push to believe, to have
Hi, welcome to the Mindset for Success TV show. I'm Temia Brinson, your host, and today our guest is Joseph Haynes Davis, and he is a licensed attorney in Orlando, Florida, who is also a Value Adjustment Board attorney, special magistrate for 20 Florida counties, and an international broadcast legal, political, and social policy analyst. So, Joseph Haynes Davis, welcome to the show.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
All right, wonderful. I'm so glad to have you here as a legal expert. This is exciting. Okay.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm a legal expert, but I'm here to participate.
Okay. Well, we're going to do our trial review for this episode, and we're going to go over the Derek Chauvin jurors and the MarKeith Lloyd trial. For you guys in the audience, MarKeith Lloyd trial. That's a local case here in Orlando, Florida. So I just wanted to touch something local, even though I have people from all over. But it's a high-profile case here in Florida. Okay, so Joseph, let me go to you about this first. Let's tackle this Derek Chauvin jurors. Don Lemon, he came out with this big interview. He interviewed all of the jurors, well, most of the jurors, and they shared some of their thoughts of how they deliberated and how they came to the conclusion of what they came to. One of the jurors, Dodie Dowd, said that they took a number of votes during deliberations. And another juror explained that all of them agreed on a guilty verdict for the manslaughter charge. But then a couple of them played devil's advocate. That's what they said, to raise questions about the defense that the defense would point out. So let me play this clip, and then I want your thoughts afterwards.
So how did you guys approach it? Did you take a vote right away?
Yes.
You did?
Yes.
Tell me about that.
We all voted right away, just to kind of did a stance of where we were all at. And of course, we weren't all together. So that knew we had to take each step little by little. And we voted many times throughout the whole process.
So the first vote you took, was it, or any of them, were they anonymous? Did you do it by note, or did you just...
It was all anonymous. We just filled out a piece of paper and...
You had no idea?
Yeah.
Nope.
So you had no idea. And so what was that first
Little
vote?
pieces of paper like this.
Yeah.
And then I kept track. So then when we voted, I wasn't the foreperson, but I kept track of the yeses, or the guilties, the not guilties, and the undecided. And the first one, which we all agreed to discuss, was the manslaughter charge. And
That was the first vote you took,
That
was
was the
manslaughter.
first
You didn't
vote.
take an overall on everything. You did the manslaughter
The
first.
manslaughter first. That was 100% guilty.
The first one.
But then, and it was kind of like, oh, wow, how did that happen? Okay, let's go to the next one. But there was a couple of us that played devil's advocate. I know Sheree was one of them with me. And we said, no, let's talk about what the defense is saying, though, as the opposite argument. Let's make sure we can rule out the reasons why it's not manslaughter from the defense side of things. So Jody actually, we got a whiteboard, and Jody went up and she started writing all of the defense arguments on the whiteboard. And then we discussed every one of those.
Wow, that was interesting. Okay, so Joseph, what do you say? Do you think this was a thorough deliberations process, in your opinion? Because I noticed that they, some of them had their mind already made up, after watching everything, going through the trial and, observing everything. And so they immediately took a vote. but then others were, on the fence or were undecided. So do you think this was a thorough deliberation? Because I don't know usually how the jurors do it on the inside. What do you think?
Well, it sounds like it. I mean, I've not been on a jury. Uh, you haven't probably been on a jury. And most people watching this broadcast with you and I have not been jurors either. So the interview that the clip you just broadcast here gives some insight into how those jurors came to their conclusions and how those jurors processed the information. Everyone should keep in mind the jury process varies by jury to jury. And what I mean by that is that the juries are made up of individuals from the communities that the trial is taking place. And also you have to keep in mind that each one of those jurors are individuals themselves. So they are going to think and look and analyze the arguments and the admitted evidence to the best of their ability and do their process. That's why you have a jury foreman. That's why you have jury instructions, etc. And that's why our system here in the United States of America, although not perfect, is the best on the planet. At the end of the day, the jury makes their decision based upon the admitted evidence. You've had, throughout history, you've had problems, of course, when juries were put together during Jim Crow, post Reconstruction, etc. You obviously had bias and jury nullifications during the 50s and 60s when you had issues of lynchings and those type of matters. But at the end of the day, getting back to the point you asked me about the clip we just saw, it looks like they did their best as individual citizens to analyze and give weight to the admitted evidence from the Chauvin trial. And I have covered that trial extensively as a participant with TRT, which is the Turkish national broadcast outlet for the English-speaking world. So I've followed it as best as one can.
Right. And so let me ask you, Joseph, is the fact that some were undecided and that they actually had to go through the defense material, is that any indication of how well or how weak, either or, of a case that the defense put on?
I think it's an indication of their attempt to do their jobs. Again, you haven't been on a jury. I haven't been on a jury. But if you were picked to be on the jury, and once you've been sworn in, I would like to think that you would be committed to doing the job that is before you as best you can. And that is a job that you'd be sworn to, and it's a job that is part of being an American citizen, under this great Constitution of ours. Mm-hmm. So now let me also say, for the viewing public, on the other hand, there is an article in the Washington Post. You'll have to research it and do through your search engine by Professor Paul Butler from Georgetown, who has been critical of the jury process under our system of law and so forth, because of the peremptory strikes that are allowed for the defense, I should say, and prosecution. So I would encourage, now I have not read it, I've just read an overview of it, but I would ask your audience to also look into that, because that will give you another perspective. And while I do not know Professor Butler, he apparently is well respected in the legal community because he's a Georgetown law professor.
Okay. All right. And so let's move on to the video portion. Now, they also, the jurors with Don Lemon in his interview, they also discussed the disturbing video of Derek Chauvin on Floyd's neck, and how painful it was to watch it over and over, to check all the relevant information, and all the different angles and everything. And at one point, they agreed that if not, it wasn't for the video recorded by Danella Frazier, that's her name. She was a bystander on the curb watching everything, and she just recorded it on a cell phone. And they said that they would not have been in the room to begin with if it wasn't for the outrage from that video. So I want to ask you, um, as far as legalities, how difficult is it to get video from a bystander entered into evidence?
Well, the short answer is that it depends. Obviously, the entity or the representative or the lawyer who is attempting to get it admitted has to lay the proper foundation. It's an issue of relevancy and the whole 9 yards. But let me take a step back. Even before then, I think the issue also becomes whether or not the individual citizen has the right to videotape what I call rogue police activity.
Right.
I have called these citizen journalists, and this basically is the expansion of not only technology with our cell phones, but it's also the expansion of the First Amendment right to record that information. Here in the state of Florida, that right does have the right to record police activity does have some limitations. In Florida statute 934.03. But it's protected again by your First Amendment right. And also
Okay.
the 11th Circuit here in the state of Florida has laid out that it is subject to reasonable time, manner, and place restrictions. But
Okay.
in general, if it is attempting to be recorded in a public place where you have the right to be there, you do have the right to do it. You cannot interfere with the police activity while you are recording it, but you do have a right, and you have to make sure you have a right. Now, there's more restrictions if it is a private place, and again, the
Oh,
issue
yeah.
becomes whether or not you have a right to be there. You might have to ask for officer consent, but the general proposition and the general answer to your question is yes, we have a right to record that police activity, especially if it's out on a public street and so forth. And I believe that is again based upon the First Amendment. It's a First Amendment right, and
Yes.
it expands that right because of the expansion of technology, that being the recording of things through your cell phone.
Okay. So yeah, I was thinking along that lines, but now you struck a nerve almost with me with the limitations, because that's something I didn't know. What are the limitations now? I mean, I
Well,
didn't
again,
even know about any limitations. That's
right,
ridiculous.
right. Well, that's why I gave you the statute and for your audience. At the end of the day, there are limitations in recording people in Florida. It could be telephone and so forth. So it's under the statute. But the limitations are the time, place, and manner limitations that are set forth in the First Amendment. But in general, and I want to
Okay.
make this clear, if you are in a public place, and
Okay.
obviously you have a right to be there, and you are looking at the public activity, you have a right to record it.
Okay.
So that should take away any, you know, uneasy feelings about asserting your First Amendment rights
Right.
as a citizen on the street.
So if the officer tells me, let's say it's like a
He might
you
tell you
know,
to get back.
oh, okay.
He
All
might
right.
tell you, but you can still
Okay.
record.
Okay.
Again,
I
as
got
long as you don't interfere.
right. Okay. So like
If
Darnella,
you're on the
she
sidewalk, you're
on
fine.
the corner of the store, on the curb actually. They were standing in there, but they didn't interfere though. They didn't go
Yeah,
near him. They just
right,
stood there. I mean,
right.
they might have said a couple of comments like, "Hey, dude, get off of him.
Yeah,
You're
but
killing
at
him."
at
But
the end of the day, in that instance, uh, the limitations were met, and as I have said over and over again in my international broadcast work, there was nothing. The only people who could have, quote unquote, saved George Floyd were the other police themselves. If a citizen would have intervened, that citizen would have been arrested and been charged with a felony, and that would probably be battery upon a Leo, a law enforcement officer. So,
okay.
but the citizen journalists, as that's what I've called them, because
Mhm.
that's what they are. The citizen journalists did what they were supposed to do and recorded the rogue police activity, and this person, Chauvin, was convicted of it.
Right.
And that's the power we have under this great Constitution we have, the United States
Yes.
Constitution.
Awesome. Okay. Well, that's good information to know just in case. Okay. All right. So let's go on to the MarKeith Lloyd's case because I know you have to run. And let me just get these questions for this case. I'm not going to show any clips. Um, I thought about it because you know how I do my research and I like to put in clips just to give, a little background. But here in the metropolitan area of Orlando, it's kind of touchy. And I actually know some people who are, kind of related to some people that's involved. So out of respect, and I don't want to play any clips. So um, I noticed when I was doing some research, I'm kind of with another way because I was going to get in details of the trial, but I went another way because just Wednesday it popped up that the prosecutors in the MarKeith Lloyd's trial filed a motion Wednesday to remove the judge presiding over the case. So, does this have any effect on? I know they're at the sentencing phase of one, and I think he has to go on trial for another for the officer, right? Correct me if I'm wrong about that, but does this have any validity? First of all, is this motion valid? Second of all, how could it affect the verdict or the appeal or any sentencing?
Okay. In the MarKeith Lloyd trial, right now, you are in the penalty phase, the sentencing phase, the penalty
Mhm.
phase. Okay. Now, the motion that was filed by the prosecution, Mr. Williams, when you ask whether or not it is quote unquote valid, it's valid. The
Okay.
issue becomes whether or not the judge is going to remove herself. It is not likely this judge will remove herself. In fact, I believe she will not remove herself.
Okay.
What she did, she is going to allow in the penalty phase the helicopter video of the helicopter video of the arrest,
Right.
a 2-minute video of the arrest and the video showing the kicking of the defendant, Mr. Lloyd, and also allow the testimony of the delay in the medical treatment of Mr. Lloyd.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, because this is a death penalty case, I believe that the judge has made these rulings because it is a death penalty case. That being it is the ultimate punishment. It is set forth constitutionally in the Eighth Amendment under the Cruel and Unusual Punishment Clause. It is legal in the state of Florida through the gurney and the medicine that they, if you want to call it that they give the convict after all the appeals have been exhausted. So getting back to your question about the motion filed by the prosecution, it is also the basis, and it's on the record if the defense also, appeals anything that happened in the trial and in the penalty phase. And let me also say that, again, going to the jury, I mean, at the end of the day, it's going to be the jury that's going to decide whether or not he gets life, like the other case, if he's going to get the case with I forget her name, the young lady that he was convicted of murdering his girlfriend and the baby that she was carrying. But that's what this boils down to, whether or not he's going to get life or death. And these are so-called mitigating factors that the jury can consider in considering whether or not he gets life or death. So now, like you, I do know folks that were connected with the late Lieutenant Clayton.
Yeah. Deborah
relatives and so
Clayton.
forth.
Yeah.
And I also want to say to your audience that I had in the past met Lieutenant Clayton out at a location near Colonial, and I think that would be John Young or whatever. But she seemed to be a very, very nice person. She was nice to me. In fact, I met her in my first judicial campaign. And yeah, so it was a huge loss. And I think that everyone in the community, to some degree, is still mourning that loss. And I would also say that this trial and the following of this trial and the monitoring of this trial and the analysis of this trial has been, to some degree, very difficult, even for a person like myself or any other person who is participating in the reporting or analysis of this trial, because it was a very, very painful situation. In particular, after she was murdered, the days thereafter, when the defendant, Mr. Lloyd, was on the run. Nobody knew where he was. And, that was a very tense period for all of us here in Central Florida.
But don't you think, even though emotionally I agreed with the actions of the police department, I hate to say that, but hey, I have to be honest. Emotionally, I agreed with their actions, and they beat the living daylights out of him, But don't you think that they kind of negated like the case, the sentencing part? This is why the prosecution is having to file a motion, because they're going to be looking at all that they did at the time of the arrest. And
Well,
not only that, I'm kind of feeling some kind of way about the prosecution, because again, as doing my research, I found out that they didn't even question the jurors on their thoughts about use of force by police. So I'm like, you guys were not prepared. I mean,
well,
it's so disheartening.
I don't think it's an issue of preparation. I think it's an issue of the scope of what would be admissible and what would not be admissible. In terms of the police actions during the arrest, I think it's appropriate for me not to have any comment at all about it. The video speaks for itself. Now, to recap, because I think it's appropriate based upon your question to me, it's only going to be 2 minutes of the video arrest and of the kicking of Mr. Lloyd and the testimony of the delay in the medical treatment. That's going to be very limited. And then the helicopter video of the arrest will also be to some degree limited. Now,
Yeah, but they still gonna see it.
yeah. But at the end of the day, that's what's been reported. And let me also say that that is why when you respectfully have judicial elections and so forth, you need to pay attention to the judicial elections, but a lot of people don't. And that is not, these comments are not in any way to demean or criticize Judge MarKeith, because she has the discretion. She's been on the bench, and that's what she did.
Yeah.
As to whether or not it was the right thing, only time will tell. And I have absolutely no comment on whether or not it was the right thing or not. But to the viewer and to the citizen who may disagree or have questions, the next time there's a judicial election, you need to pay attention.
You need to exercise your right. Yeah, exercise your right to vote.
And again, this has nothing to do with Judge MarKeith.
Right. Yeah, I understand your position. However, my position, I just feel some kind of way. It's just disheartening because I think that they kind of negated their own cause there, and then you kind of can't blame the judge for letting it in. I mean, that's her job. So I want to thank you for coming on because you gave a lot of knowledge and a lot of information legal wise. I know you said you're not a legal expert, but hey, I can send you, what is it, legal analyst? I can send you in that orb, okay?
Thank you.
Yeah, you have knowledge that you just dropped, especially about the limitations on recording. But come to find out, it's not all that big of a deal, and we still have a right to record, so that's great.
Right.
Glad to hear it.
Yes, ma'am. Well, thank you for having me. And again, I encourage your audience to pay close attention and do what you can to study as best as you can the United States Constitution, because that is where your rights come from. And I would like to remind everybody that the Constitution is there to limit the government's intrusion on your rights.
Right. Okay. Well, again, thank you so much for coming. But before I let you go, because I always do this with my guests, is there anything you want to announce, any kind of projects you're working on, any kind of shout outs or whatever you want to say at this moment?
Well, no, not at all. I mean, I thank you. It's programs like these that I participate on. I guess you can go to my law office webpage at www.jhdlaw.com for anything you might need. And it's linked to the law office's Facebook page. So you can read about some of the things that I've done. And I would say go to my YouTube account so that you can subscribe. If you put in my name, Joseph Haynes Davis, it'll come up, and subscribe to my YouTube page. That would be a big help.
All right. Okay. Well, you be blessed. And I thank you for coming on.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay. So you guys, we're going to take a quick break, like a 30-second break, and we'll be right back on the other side. We got Russell Drake coming on. All right, all right. We are back. We are back. And if you're watching, if you just tuned in, you are watching Mindset for Success TV show. I'm Temia Brinson, your host. And our guest on this second segment is Russell Drake. And he is a community advocate and public speaker. And he is also the CEO and founder of Build Black Daily. So, Russell Drake, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Temia. Again, I appreciate the wonderful journalism you're doing with this Mindset for Success. You're spreading messages that need to be heard, need to be reiterated. You're keeping issues that people sweep under the rug and only stick in it for a moment. And you're keeping up good movement overall. So I thank you for all you continue to do.
All right, awesome. So, this second segment, actually, we've been talking about the Derek Chauvin jurors and the MarKeith Lloyd trial. But with you, I kind of want to focus on the Derek Chauvin jurors. You know, Don Lemon recently did a interview with several of them. And I just want to go over that because it was very intriguing. And I like to sometimes go behind the scenes with them and see what the deliberations were like. Because, you know, some people, whether you like it or you don't like the outcome, you have some type of way about, oh, well, it was rigged. They already knew what they were, you know, they came in there with one mind and they were pressured. And, you know, so I'm grateful that Don Lemon, you know, he's not my favorite, but I'm glad he did this piece. This is one good journalistic piece that he did. And I'm glad he went to, you know, ponder those thoughts with the jurors and we can get inside their heads a little bit.
Yeah.
So for the trial review, the jurors in the Derek Chauvin trial, they indicated to Don that they had a light bulb moment, you know, when they were in deliberations, and they began to focus on Derek Chauvin's actions. Actually, it was his lack of providing medical assistance to George Floyd, like at the end. And in essence, he had no intentions of saving George Floyd's life. So let me just play this clip because we're going inside. Like I said, Don Lemon interviewed them, and we're going a little bit into their mindset. And let me just take a look at this, and then I want your thoughts afterwards.
Okay.
We realized for charge 2, at some point, I think it was Jody, I'm pretty sure it was Jody, said, wait a minute, does the intended act of harm have to be the death of George Floyd, or can it be him not providing the life support? And it was like all of a sudden light bulbs just went on for those people, I think, that were undecided or on the not guilty side.
Yeah, go ahead. I want to hear from you, Jody. Why is that? You brought that up? What did you?
I brought that up because
Tell me what you brought up and why.
I brought up to the fact that this is not what he did, but more or less what he didn't do. He did not provide life-saving measures for George Floyd when he knew that the guy was in pain or needed medical attention. Even the firefighter that was off said, check his pulse, check his pulse. Well, then they checked his pulse and they said, well, do you want to do anything? No, we're leaving him here. He had ample to roll him over and start CPR, and he didn't. He didn't move one bit. And even when the EMS came up and checked him, he never even got up. And he knew he had been lifeless for 30 seconds to a minute. He still never stepped up and let the EMS come in and do their job. He had to have the EMS tap him to get up. That, to me, said more than what he actually did, that he just didn't do anything to help him at that time.
Why do you think that was a light bulb?
Well, when we were in deliberations, and Jody did bring that up, and we did look through everything very, very carefully, what I thought about is something that was said during the trial, and that is Minneapolis Police Department has a motto. And if I'm understanding it correctly, their motto is, in our custody, in our care. George Floyd was in their custody. He was never in their care. And that, for me, just it just hit hard. I don't feel like they ever cared for him.
Wow, wow. What do you think about that, Russell? Because that was what they call a light bulb moment when I watched the whole interview over and over. Okay, so this is when remember when they said that at the beginning they first took a vote and the manslaughter was 100% guilty, but the other charge it was undecided. It was a few of them was undecided, but this light bulb moment turned that around for them. So, what do you think about this argument that David Chauvin didn't provide any life saving measures?
Yeah. First, let me say this is a great topic, and I think the jurors were very astute in looking at everything, looking at every angle of it, knowing that you're law enforcement, you're a first responder. Your duty is to serve and protect and take care of people. And when you apprehend somebody, you're supposed to do it and say, you're supposed to make sure that they are alive. And if they're not alive, you're supposed to take measures to try to revive them. They're absolutely right. That was not done. And, I think that should be looked at more often than not. This isn't the first time that somebody was killed and nobody offered any life-saving measures. You look a few years back with Mike Brown. Mike Brown was, shot dead and left in the middle of the street. Nobody tried to revive him. Who knows if he could have been saved? The same thing that happened with the tragic death of Trayvon Martin right in the Central Florida area. George Zimmerman didn't try to revive him at all. Everybody starts panicking, running, and looking for excuses. Needless to say, you can look at what's going on right now in Kenosha, where Kyle Rittenhouse is being tried. And according to him, he went there with the intent to protect and to do safety measures. And he didn't perform any medical safety measures on anybody. He lied about being an EMT, mind you, and had no intent of such. So I think that jury was spot on, and it's good to see and hear that. And hopefully it gets in the minds of others when they have the opportunity to serve on a jury and they take it that seriously, that they use their natural born common sense they're born with, as well as analytical and critical thinking throughout the whole thing.
Amen. Analytical and critical thinking. Great. I love that phrase because a lot of people still in 2021, a lot of people have conceived, I was going to say the other word, preconceived notions about how we think and how we don't think. So, but this juror came with it. They really got to the nitty gritty. They got down in it. And even one juror said, I don't know if you saw this piece, but one juror said one of the arguments that the defense came up with was that he was high. George Floyd was on something. And they showed the clip in the car. They were trying to get him into the car and, showing that something was in his mouth, whether it was gum or a pill. But the defense was trying to say, he was on drugs. And one of the jurors said, well, if they were concerned about his life and that he was actually high, it was a Narcan right there. Like they could have assisted him with, detoxing and getting down off of that drug right then, but they didn't care. The can was right there in the video, and I never noticed it until she said that. And it just amazes me how astute and how attentive they were.
Yeah, and I concur with all of that. In addition, I think that the jury really looked at also they were trying to get to the real answer is, why did you put your knee on this man's neck for 8 minutes and 46 seconds? That and nobody ever answered that. Nobody could even explain that. You can say anything. You could have thought he used counterfeit money. You could have thought he was on drugs. You could have thought he looked like somebody else who may have had a warrant out. Any of that. But nobody, and I mean nobody, has said, what caused you to put your knee on a neck? And as well as the officers who are equally as guilty, who were just following his lead, who did nothing to help him. One officer who was new to the force. You know, that even brings up the issue of what were those officers supposed to do? That one
Training.
of the things they said glaringly, one of the jurors said is, if this were not recorded, we wouldn't even be here. If it were not
Yes.
recorded, the brave person that not only that recorded and didn't intercede, that recorded it, that caused a national and worldwide movement and outrage to show this is what happens when the camera's
Hmm.
not being on. This is what happens when the body cam just disappears, when they're deleting cell phone video from people. That's what
Hmm.
really happens. And it's egregious and horrible. And to me, I'm really offended that there's even a defense for such. The nerve to try to say that I'm not guilty. Well, then tell it. If you're that not guilty, I wish they would have put Chauvin on the stand so
Take
he
the
could say,
stand.
what were
Exactly.
you, you know what? Tell us what you were doing, man. What
Hmm.
technique is this? What is after 3.5 minutes when he lost consciousness? You know, when he continued to put the what they call the blood choke on him with his
Right.
hands in his pocket, pushing all the weight of his body on his neck.
Hmm.
What could he have thought he was doing? And you know, and
Exactly.
like I say, the people that sat there quietly that were his you know, I know they work under him, and if the cameras aren't rolling and they stopped him from doing that, oh, they would have been disciplined, they would have been suspended, they would have been retaliated against and or fired.
Yeah.
So the law enforcement community needs to really talk about this and say, hey, what are you really supposed to do when you know this person's over the line, over the edge, and no cameras rolling?
Hmm.
Because that's what needs to get talked about further and be hampered down. People say, oh, they need de-escalation training. No, they don't. That doesn't happen. That hasn't happened to anyone else. That happened to a helpless black
Right.
man in handcuffs. And you know, I
And
also give credit to the crowd that stood there and didn't intercede. See,
yes.
if the crowd intercedes, then they aggressively, everybody out there potentially gets maced and shot, and the officer
I
seems like
mean, but
they're in the right.
surprisingly, they handled it very well. They didn't get all up in the officer's face. They stood on the curb. They didn't, get too close. And even though the Darnella, she had the video recording, and you get into my next question. But still they were respectful. So I mean, that shows an example. I think we can learn a lot of lessons going forward on how to handle these situations. But yeah, you got into my next question. My next question is the jurors with Don Lemon. They also discussed the disturbing video of Chauvin on Floyd's neck, you know, and how they had to watch it over and over to come to different conclusions or to find out different angles or whatnot. And because they were in review, they were deliberating and they had to watch it over and over. And same thing I said to Joseph at one point, the jurors, all of them agreed that if it had not been for the video being recorded by a bystander, her name was Darnella Frazier, they wouldn't even been in that room. It wouldn't even be a trial if it had not been for that because of the outrage from that. And that leads me to this question because Joseph, our legal analyst earlier, he stated, we have a legal right. That's our right to record. As long as it's in a public, some limitations, but as long as some public, on a public space and you're not interfering with law enforcement, then that's our right. That's our legal First Amendment right. So that was good for the audience to know. I want them to know that information. But seeing how critical it was to have video in this case, not just a body cam, not police cam, but a video from a bystander. And it seems to be that this was the compelling video that was used in deliberations. Is it something that we as a community should practice as a way as to hold law enforcement accountable? Because it's got to be something that we can do.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think absolutely is there. See, it's all part of the community, right? It's all part of the community, and there's surveillance cameras everywhere. The city and county and state puts them out everywhere in metropolitan areas. They have cameras to record things. So I think it's our duty as a community and citizens to do the same to hold our law enforcement accountable. I don't think the majority of law enforcement are bad. I think it's a
Right.
small percentage, but it's like apples. You know, one rotten apple spoils the whole bunch. And then the rotten apple continues to rise and rise and rise and go unchecked and, you know, makes way for other rotten apples in there. So there is a need for cameras. The cameras catch a lot of things that, you know, if no camera was rolling, there would be no trial. There would be no
Mhm.
there would be no excessive protests all over the world. There would be no consistent concern from corporations who say there's a real problem. They have
Right.
seen it firsthand and couldn't deny it. And because so many people saw it firsthand, because of this one person's brave act, because she was risking it all too. We
Mhm.
never know. If it just shows you how glaringly bold it is. A person knowing that he is being recorded did this, sat on his neck,
He still
confident that
continued.
nothing would happen. It
Yes.
makes you wonder, what did this person do when the cameras weren't rolling?
I mean,
We know
and
that
I wonder
Chauvin
if he
had,
was on something. You
well,
know, they're
perhaps
accusing George Floyd of being on something. Was Derek on something?
he didn't get tested for anything. He went home. They left the scene and went home. They went home completely. In so many of these cases, the persons that killed somebody went home
Mhm.
comfortably. Nobody checked them for drugs. They could have made any phone calls. They could have done anything. It was
Mhm.
only the camera that caught it. The camera
Right.
catches this. The camera catches the tragic death of Ahmaud Arbery.
Yes.
Although the camera was one of the people who were the cohorts who thought
Right.
in turning over the film that he was saving himself, but that's another
Mhm.
story. But you know, the cameras are catching this stuff, these things,
Right.
more often than not. And people, and even when you delete stuff from the phone, that stuff's still there. You
Still
know,
can be recovered. Yeah.
so I think it's imperative that we keep doing it. I think we ought to, and if anybody's trying to put up laws to prevent people from recording, we got a real problem
We're gonna
because
have to fight it because
yeah,
remember before they didn't believe us
they
unless
don't.
they see it on the camera.
They still don't. There are some people right now that say they think the whole George Floyd tragic murder was staged. And it's
Oh my
like, you
goodness.
think that was staged? And it's like, well, how about you lay on the ground and let somebody put their knee on your neck for 7.5 minutes, but not even 8 minutes. See how you feel. You know, I'm like,
Mhm.
it wasn't staged. None of these things are staged. It's like it just shows the real atrocities that exist. Some of them are a bad law enforcement culture. Some are racism. Some is just it's
Mhm.
just people feeling abusive. They
Right.
feel like the badge entitles them to treat people any type of way. You don't have to go far from here. All you have to do is ask people in the homeless community how they get treated when a soccer game starts. How they don't get escorted out of the area. They get beat out of the area. They get pushed around to get out of the area.
Right.
Again, those that are the most vulnerable get treated the worst out there. I mean, you want to see a real case study? Tell some people to dress up like they homeless. Get the police chief himself to sit out there and see how his officers are treating people out there. It's a bad thing. Sit in the park, be asleep in that park till it's after 4:30 a.m. and see how they get treated out there. These are
Wow.
real things that continue to happen to people all over the United States. So there does need to be mass reform of law enforcement. There needs to be more people holding them accountable. It should be from the top all the way down, but it has to start with us first to push them in that direction.
Wow, that's interesting. So we have to keep our eye out. I mean, because first of all, we don't need to interfere. We need to be respectful. I think that's one of the lessons that we as a community need to get. I think this worked in this situation because a lot of times when we get ourselves involved, then we make the situation worse. Even though I don't know how you can get much more worse than death, but we tend to make it worse when we get involved. And in this case, I think one of the things we can take away from this is that you can be respectful, you can be on a public space. Um, out of the law enforcement way, but record it. It's imperative because like I said before, they didn't believe us until they saw it with their own eyes. And it's like, oh, you lying and you always pulling the race card and and I'm like, Oh, now y'all believe it. Now that y'all see it on video. Now it's a whole bunch of non-blacks that's like, "Oh, no, this ain't right." So I'm like, "Okay, well, this is working, so we need to keep our cameras ready, keep it on ready." Even when you're yourself like, I
Yeah,
um,
you,
yeah,
you're right.
I
We
hate
have to
getting caught
stay.
up, but even when you're jogging, um, you probably need to have your cell phone handy.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you do. You have to. You know, you have to be conscious of this. That as much progress as there's been made, there's still elements of hate. There's still elements of disparity that happens to try to hold brothers and sisters down. Even, you're doing good, you're minding your own business, but there's some that feel, let me knock at you, let me push you down, let me attack you from behind, let me, drive while you're jogging and yell at you with shotguns and think that you're just going to stand still. That persons think that they have the upper hand and that there's a tier system, that they're
Mhm.
entitled to treat people any type of way, abusively, egregiously, take advantage of people in any sense, and they
Mhm.
and confident that they'll get away with it.
Right.
Confident that they'll get away with it. I'm sure you'll have another show talking about the man on trial up there in Kenosha, but I mean, all you have to do is look at his how comfortable his demeanor was just sitting through the whole
Oh,
trial.
you mean Cal? Yeah.
Yeah, just sitting there comfortably. Even Chauvin was sitting there looking comfortable,
Well, I
and it
mean, at
shouldn't have
least
even.
he took the stand and gave his side. Derek didn't even explain anything.
Oh no, oh no, they weren't. Yeah, they weren't
Nothing.
putting him on the stand at all. And then
Because he probably was high. That's it. I mean,
I don't even
this
think
is
he was
my
high.
opinion. This let me put this legal disclaimer out. This is my opinion. I think
I don't think so. See, and I'm gonna tell you, here's a glaring thing: the police union in Minneapolis came out with statements after attacking George Floyd's character. And
mhm.
that in itself tells me, I'm like, hold on. It's one thing to say, I think my client is not guilty because, he's a part of his union. We stand up for him. It's another thing to come out and try to do character assassination after a person's been assassinated. See, as
Oh
blacks, we
yeah.
get two murders.
The police
First
union,
they murder you, then they murder your character
your
and
character.
reputation. Try to demean you when you can't speak. You're dead. You're wrongfully dead. Did nothing to be killed. And and
But one
now
thing,
let's
I mean,
just tear his
they did kind of
character.
backtrack a little bit because I think they saw the nature of the trial and they saw that their own police officers came out and say, no, this is not what we do. So that was a little comforting too. And I think we can learn some lessons from there as well as far as police reform, because as a tool that we can use as far as the our culture and our community, we can use with law enforcement. This is how you're looking. You're looking like a racist. You're looking like an organization who gunned down blacks and who just defiantly and blatantly kill black. This is what you look like. And one of the worst things among non-blacks is to be called a racist. There is actually some shame with that. And so what seems to be working in that case is that they didn't want to be associated with it. So I think that's another tool that we can use as far as how we deal with police, um, law enforcement, and how they need to reform is look at your credibility. This is how you look. If you're comfortable with looking that way, then, we're going to have to do something about make some changes in our own city and in our own county. But hopefully, the shame will make you yourself do a turnaround.
You're right. That's the hope. I don't think many of them care about the shame at all. I think many of them are comfortable. They use that badge as an opportunity. And I shouldn't say many, but the few that do, they use this
The
opportunity,
ones that do, yeah.
yeah, to abuse it, to pulverize people, to push them down, to for them to make themselves feel good and build up their own self-esteem, because it takes a little person to do that. And even if you ask school psychologists right now, These kids who are out here getting into fights and bullying with different gender and racial biases in mind when they're doing it, when you ask them what they aspire to be right now, many of them are saying, I aspire to go on and be a police officer.
Right.
And
Yeah.
so they want to take that attitude on into law enforcement and now keep pulverizing people. That should
Kind of
be a
like Cal. I
concern.
think he probably was going in that direction, wanted to be an officer,
Oh yeah.
running around there trying to be a firefighter and officer.
Yeah. Yeah. See it, yeah. And see, it's like we have some good officers. We have some quality officers. We do need people to serve and protect. But we
So
don't
I
need
think
people who feel comfortable putting a foot or
right,
knee or elbow on people's neck. We got,
right. But see,
you know,
my
it's like,
point is, in this case, I think the shame did work, and so there are some bad apples and some guys and gals in the law enforcement that don't have a problem with that shame. But I guarantee you, most of the police chief, the chief don't want to have a law enforcement. They don't want to have a unit in their organization that portrays that. So we have to put that onus, and we have to hold the chiefs accountable to clean up their own outfit. You know what I mean?
yeah, you're right. You're right. And I remember when it first, my younger brother actually lives in Minneapolis. I first heard of it from him. He was taking pictures and sending me videos and stuff. Didn't stay far from where protests were. And you know, and to be honest, that could have been him. You know, he fits the bill. I fit the bill to George Floyd. That could have been any of us. We fit the bill. But you know, when he told me about it, I put up a post and said, while we're disgusted, every law enforcement head in the United States should condemn this because this is dead wrong. And a
Reflection on
lot of
you.
people said nobody's going to condemn it. They're not going to condemn it. They're going to toe the blue line. And you're right. It was so glaring that this is way, 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 way out of bounds. There's no threat. There's nothing. There's a helpless person. So more people started speaking out. That was
They
great
had
to
to.
see.
Yeah.
That was great to see. And you had, like you say, you had outrage all over the world. There were people in New Zealand marching, saying this is horrible. And
Right.
it is. It is. And I think that, you know, it should stain the nation in a sense. It's not, and it gets highlighted because it was a modern day lynching, right? It was a lynching. You got to see a lynching. We didn't think we see it in our lifetime. That's what that was. That's called a lynching.
There's
You
too many
lynched that man.
happening, though. I mean,
The
this is
whole
crazy.
world got to see it. And you know, and it's a travesty. But the real travesty is that it's been happening for over a century.
Far too long.
And
But I think I mean, to be on the positive, because you know the name of the show is Mindset for Success. I think we are getting some headway finally. I mean, I actually cried when the verdict came down because it's just so years when you think back in years and years and you think about the ancestry and the lineage down and what all they went through, and you imagine how many instances that happened without video throughout the years, and people that probably was buried and discarded and considered missing. You know what I mean? I mean, it just all came down at that moment. But let me try not to get emotional. Let me ask you a couple of questions, Russell.
Yes.
First of all, how do you feel about the outcome of that trial? Do you feel it was justice?
I think it was somewhat of justice. I think he should have been, you know, he should have got the max time for everything. You know, he should have, there should be no opportunity for him to get out. He should just get life in prison. I mean, he blatantly killed a man and abused his badge in doing it. You know, I think there are too many laws that protect law enforcement from being charged. And I get that there are some things that can be sketchy. And, you know, and there's a need for a policeman and policewoman's Bill of Rights. But there should, that immunity that they get, if you start hitting them in the pocketbook every time there's one of these things happens, there's going to be some big changes real quick. Every time that camera goes off, you start billing them $200 or something.
I
They're
mean, we
gonna
got to deal with the unions, Russell. These
it,
police unions. I
it,
mean, we got
well
to do
they
something about
well
this.
you're right. So the
They
unions
are in the way.
they renew these union contracts every 3 or 4 years. So when they do the collective bargaining, they would have to change it. And what should really happen is the unions should be there dealing with the money and pay. I think that's fine. But the discipline should go all the way back in the hands of the departments and agencies. If that happens, then you have more control there to
Mhm.
handle it. Because some could argue, even though the police chief in Minneapolis came out and said that was bad, the union still said he's not guilty.
Yeah. And
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 that and
and
that's the
and this thing about immunity, they negotiate all of that with the union. Like, why are you negotiating HR issues as far as reprimand when you reprimand an officer? Why is that discussed instead of, like you said, just the pay? I'm not
yeah.
understanding. They are a big problem in this country.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. And those unions, I mean, the real, especially the real big ones in big cities, yeah, they're tough and can be intimidating to people. But it's like to me, it's like it should be down with them, down with them, and people should speak out against them. It shouldn't be afraid to. There's some big cities that they can argue that those unions are pushing the city and running it. We don't
Yeah.
have that issue in Florida, but in some other
No, thank
places they
God.
do have it. And they should, I mean, we should look into that because, it's like nobody's above the law.
Mhm.
Nobody's above the law. We're all part of the community. Everybody wants to live. Everybody wants to thrive. Everybody wants to survive.
Mhm.
We can do that without pushing others down or taking advantage of them. I think the
Right.
lesson in the whole thing is as tragic as it was, George Floyd's death was an awakening.
Yeah.
I think it really served as an awakening to the whole world, especially in the United States,
Mhm.
but that we have some issues. And
Mhm.
when you see issues, you have to pour resources into them. You have to put money into them. So more groups started getting money to do things to
Mhm.
promote education, education the way out of poverty, because it's an economic thing too. It's a huge economic thing because see this happens to George Floyd economically, not thinking the black community is not going to do much economically to hurt us. This man's not going to do much to hurt us. Uh, if Chauvin knew that this was going to get worldwide outrage, he probably wouldn't have done it. He didn't know it was going to do this. Heck, even the union is back and was probably mad about it. Like, how to get
Mhm.
this exposure? And I give credit to attorneys like Attorney Ben Crump, who continue to make these issues visible to the mass media, because sometimes we wouldn't even hear about it if he didn't come there and elevate it as an issue.
Mhm.
So I know with
Well, I
same
thank
thing with
God for, the Attorney General. Oh, I forgot his name. That Keith Ellison.
yeah,
I
he's a
mean, I
son.
don't agree with him politically and everything. I think he's kinda out there, but as far as Attorney General, he did a great job. He didn't, he wasn't selfish. He didn't try it himself. He put his best team together, and they did it, you know what I mean? As opposed to here with, Trayvon Martin, they lost the case. So I think we're doing better. It's some lessons we can learn as far as attorneys, prosecutions, and attorney generals and how they try cases. We need to get better at what we do as far as the charge and how we try these cases.
That's
Um,
that's a great takeaway, because from what I understand, an attorney, a private practice attorney, actually said he would come work for them, and they brought him in to
mhm.
prosecute the case.
Yeah,
And
he was working with them before because Keith Ellison knew him. They worked together, and but he left to start his own practice. You're right, and then but he volunteered, and yeah, he was like, "Hey, man, I got to get on this case," and yeah, they
and
did that.
and that's the thing. See, I think as we know, a lot of people start their own private practices because they have the opportunity to make more money. We're not mad at that. We encourage that.
Mhm.
Start your own business. However, what happens is then it may leave some persons who aren't as experienced in some larger trials and don't have the candor that's necessary to get that win or process the proper charges that should be filed. Because if you put a charge that's say too high, then that person may not be guilty of that.
I
It
think
was
that's
good that they
I think
charged
they
with,
may come down with Kyle.
yeah,
We'll see though. I think he was overcharged, but we'll see what the juror. I mean, we'll see what the jurors say.
we'll see. I don't think he's overcharged, but the thing is burden of proof. You got to prove it.
Exactly.
That's the
Like
thing.
you shouldn't go with the case you absolutely know you can't win. You know what I mean? Like you
Yeah.
need to go for the one that you 100% can win. And that's what I think Keith Ellison was so good at. And he was like, no, we're not going for this. We're going for that. And I think that he's going to try the lady for in the other shooting, the other case, for manslaughter.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I think
So
they're
it's
gonna get the
picking the
same
right
thing.
charge.
Absolutely. And while many think that should be a slam dunk case, they're not slam dunks because you have to get 12 people to say guilty.
Right.
And that's not easy. It takes work, it takes effort, it takes a strategy, it takes experience. And
Okay,
in
so
the Kyle Rittenhouse case, we'll see how that works out. I've gotten a look at some of it. I do think his fake emotional outburst was the worst acting I've ever seen in life.
I mean, I've seen some commentary on that and I can see some of the fakeness, but I also saw, I think it was AC Anderson Cooper, but don't quote me on that. It's one of those shows where one of the jurors, well, one person reporter was saying that they witnessed one of the jurors, they seemed like they were affected. And so we might say that we don't buy him, but somebody on the jury, he might affect them. And I actually think he might have done himself a good favor by putting himself on the stand and telling his side. Because guess what? The ones who are dead, just like Zimmerman, the ones who are dead are not here to tell their story. And that's how I think Zimmerman got off, because Trayvon Martin isn't here to tell his story. And Zimmerman got off because of a self-defense claim. And my thing is, Trayvon Martin was in self-defense. You know what I mean? Like, you came after him. So I felt like the whole thing wasn't the prosecution. I don't think they did a good job, because Zimmerman, his attorneys told his side of the story, but nobody argued on behalf of Trayvon Martin. He's the one that acted in self-defense. So
Yeah, and I think the biggest difference is there was no camera.
yeah,
There was no video
you're
that
right.
we know of, at least. I have my own theory that everything gets recorded, whether we know it or not. And if somebody recorded, they never came forth with that video. I do find it hard to believe that something like, there's a scuffle or something going on in the middle of a living complex and nobody recorded it.
Or it's
in
no
the last 20
street
years.
cameras or nothing. Yeah.
Somebody I think somebody has that recorded. No, maybe we'll find out in another 20 years and
Yeah.
see what exactly happened. But that's really the biggest difference. That, because he's dead, that camera would have told a lot more. And I think with the Kyle Rittenhouse case, because a lot of it was recorded, while his emotional act may have affected one or two jurors. I looked at the rest of the questioning. He's been caught up in several lies.
Yeah.
That on
Yeah.
camera, he was like, he's saying he doesn't remember, and it's like, this stuff is on camera. You got this too, and he's caught up lying over and over and over in there.
Right.
So I have some amount of faith that he's going to, he's going to be found guilty of something. I can't say what though, totally.
I think maybe a lesser charge, but yeah. I mean, it's a lot of differences, but I think the main thing I took away is that the dead, they don't have anyone they can't tell this side of the story. So it's
Right.
very imperative that we have video, even if we have our own video or, maybe our outfits who have small businesses, maybe we need to start, even for security purposes, maybe we need to start have cameras. So, but
Yeah.
our time is getting a little limited. Let me just ask you a few more questions. I'm trying to get these questions in. Do you feel that this case, Derek Chauvin case, did you feel that this sent a message to law enforcement with those who had ill intentions? Because in this specific case, law enforcement, his own officers, his own people came out against him and said, like, no, this is not how we do law enforcement. This is not protocol. And also the verdict that came out. So do you think that this sends a message to them, to law enforcement, the ones who, the bad actors?
Yeah, I think this definitely sends a message to rogue cops who've been rogue for a while because they see one of their brethren in law enforcement getting hemmed up and put in jail. Whether it's life for 10 years, an officer going to jail is a tough thing. So I think it is a wake up call for some of them. For some of them who are close to retirement, they may be shrugging their shoulders, but I think it is making a difference in seeing that example set. I think even just the outrage just getting poured on because we have shows like this that continue to keep these issues relevant and not sweep them under the rug. They see the ripple effects of it. Even where officers aren't charged, they're let go from different departments. They're not able to get jobs. Some of them even have maybe even some of their pensions and retirements in danger. So they're seeing that, all right, people are cracking down on things. I do think that there may be some effort by some other legislators to try to cover them more, but I don't think that's going to fly anymore. And people are awake. People are more wide awake and attentive than ever. And then I think another takeaway is jury assignment is serious. Being a juror requires you to not just look at what's going on there, but think outside of the box and look at the whole picture. Here we have in the Floyd case, you had a very attentive, knowledgeable jury that was able to look at things and analyze it in a good manner. And all those that are jurors around should take the same thing, should do the same thing. Don't go in there with any prejudices, but look at what's being presented and just think about it. Should this person be dead? What was this person doing to get killed? Especially those that have no weapons that were approached.
Right.
And as long as they keep that in mind, I think we're forging in a good direction. But it's a
Okay.
marathon, not a sprint.
I know, right? One more last question because I want to get this in. This is what I'm learning. This is what I'm seeing. It seems to be a trend, and I think that we're on to something. Um, in Michael Brown's case, his family sued, and the lawsuit they settled with the city, and in the settlement they pushed for police reform. And with George Floyd, their family sued as well, and they came to a settlement as well. So, and back to Trayvon Martin, I don't know if she had any negotiations or whatever, but I know she sued the mother of Trayvon Martin. And but as far as the settlement, as far as pushing for police reform or with the neighborhood watch. I don't know about that, but looks like it's a push. Look like we're getting, the light bulb moment, so to speak. And not that it will bring our loved ones back or turn back the wheels of time, but we're getting a clue. Like we need to start suing these cities and we need to push for some type of reform when we ask for money and when we go to, to settle. And it seems like that's even more effective than what's happening in the courts. But thank God, God is stepping in over hundreds of years. Thank you, Lord, of prayers. But it's happening at the same time. We're getting some legal wins. And that's a deterrent with law enforcement. Law enforcement chiefs are speaking out. And families are suing now and pushing for reform. So I see some positive. I'm hopeful now. It's light at the end of the tunnel. So what do you think about this? Is my last question, but I had to get this in. Okay, so what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think it's wonderful that people are seeing that outside of physical force, the strongest thing we have is the legal system is suing. And when you sue, it puts people on record. It's documentation, and it's a hit. It's a hit, and that's where you do have these attorneys like Attorney Ben Crump, Attorney Natalie Jackson. You got Attorney Lee Merritt out there in Texas, who who are vessels for people to contact when things happen. You say 20 plus years ago, people didn't know who to contact when things of this sort occurred.
Right.
But now you have several attorneys, and there are more than those three I just named, that have taken it upon themselves to say, you know what, this has become a big enough issue that we're gonna work to represent you and or find representation for you. We're gonna be easily accessible so that you can reach us. So that's a huge thing. People and mind you, these attorneys get death threats every day because
Yeah.
they're going out and representing those who are underserved, who are oppressed, who don't always have the financial means. But they say, no, this is, what's right is right and what's wrong is wrong. So I think it's a great thing and service that they're continuing to do. And I think sometimes people have a misunderstanding. See, they're suing civilly, but they're not representing, on the criminal side, because that's what the state or city or county has to do. But they're, civilly, when they're hitting them with these things, that's those cities and municipalities, county, states, or even at the federal level, they're taking a hit and they don't like that. So they are
Yeah.
pushing a culture.
Michael Brown's family, I was so taken aback. I mean, to the point I don't know these people and I didn't do it, but I was so taken aback that I started to look for an email to send to her, to his mom, and be like, girl, I'm so proud of you that you actually took action. Not only did you sue, but you used that as a tool to push for police reform. So
That's
I'm
it.
like, girl, God is using you. That's sending like a loud message to anyone out there in our community or anyone else who experience injustice on behalf of their family. Not only sue, but push for reform while you're suing, because that's the perfect opportunity and tool to use at that time.
Yeah, we're evolving. We're
Hmm.
evolving in the movement is evolving. So we're seeking higher ground in it. So it's like if we can implement, we're going to implement it here. We see the stagnation is happening in legislation. So we're going to implement it in these settlements. And so they do it right there in Ferguson. They do it in Baltimore. They need to do it in Georgia.
Yeah.
So and do it in Minnesota. So keep
Yeah,
doing
the
it.
one in Georgia. What is his name? Ahmad.
Ahmaud Arbery.
Yeah. I
Yeah,
hope she sue. I hope she push for reform too.
yeah. Even in Kentucky, where the late Breonna Taylor was wrongfully killed,
Hmm.
burst in her house and she was killed, tragically killed. Even there, they're pushing local reform is getting shaped. They're trying to do it at the state level as well. So, and although it's clear the state attorney there made it clear that he's not pressing any charges, nor did he put forth any effort to do such. Um, but we see where accountability stops and where there may be a need for change, because
Right.
that state attorney has the biggest piece of the pie and biggest key to the door to help get these charges filed against people.
Hmm.
So that
Well,
it's needed
that
to
should
have
be a
persons.
lesson to anyone, and not just with injustice with as far as these killings, 'cause that's what they are. We're getting killed. So, but not only in those situations, but even in normal, well, I shouldn't say normal, but even in everyday disgruntle or any kind of complaints we have, we need to learn how to use lawsuits as a tool. So whenever we see big government or big entities that we want to see a change, when we sue, and if they come to the table and they want to settle, we need to put in our request. We need to see this change. And not only that, that's just another tool, because lately, we've been doing that through the polls, and then you'll see it get overturned by the governor or the state, not just Florida, but I mean anywhere, because laws are, this is just how the government works. Because if you have a legislative body that negates what you put in at the polls, you know what I mean? You can vote one way and they say that, hey, Florida voted this way, but then the legislator comes back writing another law that oversees that. You know what I mean? And then the governor signs it. I'm like, well, what did we go to the polls for? Okay. So we need to start suing.
We do. We need to start suing. We also need to follow the money to see who's influencing these people to change these laws. And I can tell you 90% of the time it goes back to some of those police unions. So
Yeah,
we need to look at that as well.
I'm
And
telling you, they are a
get to
big
the
problem in this country all
oh, we
over.
do. We do. But
And
like you
they
say, we are
more than negotiating just your pay.
mm-hmm.
All of these, and they say, well, how David Chauvin had like what 15, I forgot the number, how many citations he had um before this incident. And it's like, why haven't he been fired? Because of immunity.
Well, not just that, but it's I
They
don't
have
know of
certain
any other
rules, and all of
profession
that
where you
was
could get that many demerits and still move
mhm.
up the rank. You can't, a
Well,
lot
not
of time.
even move up, but he shouldn't even be an officer. He should be fired by then. Before that incident, he should have been fired.
Yeah,
And he wasn't, because of the deal with the police unions. When you sign up with them and you pay your dues, they negotiate on your behalf, and they negotiate more than just your pay. And it makes it harder for the police department to fire you.
yeah,
Yeah. So we need to they are a absolute obstacle all over this country. We need to do something about that.
yeah.
Anyway, I just let me get off my soapbox.
Mhm.
Okay, Russell, thank you for coming on, because this has really been eye-opening, and hopefully we changed some hearts and minds today, and hopefully we gave people the knowledge that they need to know to just be assertive. If they see anything, be on the lookout or whatever. But I thank you for coming on. And before I go, though, just like I do all my guests, do you have anything, just take this moment, anything you want to announce or any projects you're working on?
Yes, once again, I want to thank you and the Mindset for Success TV show for knowing that it's relevant enough to continue to press issues that others may forget about over a month or a year, and just informing the community. Overall, with Build Black Daily, as we go into the holiday season, we continue to stress the need to support Black businesses who are quality businesses. You're going to have that Small Business Saturday coming up the weekend of Thanksgiving. I want you to consider some great Black businesses. I have a lot featured on the website, buildblackdaily.com, or the social media handle at buildblackdaily on Twitter, Instagram, and or Facebook. I'm also doing some partnership with Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated, Orlando Alumni Chapter, where every month we're going to be going to a different Black business to see how much we can generate for that business if we pool all our monies together. So this Thursday, we'll be going to Birchwood Coffee in Apopka. It's a very good coffee shop. It's off 436, right next to Something Fishy, which is Black owned as well. One thing in supporting these Black businesses, it doesn't just support Black people, but it supports all local businesses, because there are other businesses you'll support when you patronize those in those areas. And I thank you again for the time. And everyone out there, Temia Brinson is doing great work. Please support her and tune in. And thank you again for the opportunity.
All right, awesome, awesome. So you guys check out the website. It's buildblackdaily.com.
Yep.
Okay, so you guys go ahead and check that out. And once again, I guys, thank you for tuning in. We're going to be here next Saturday. We're here every Saturday, 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. And on Facebook Live and also on YouTube Live. Again, that's every Saturday, 10 a.m. And then it will rerun. A few episodes behind, but we rerun it on Kingdom Purpose TV. And if you have Roku or Apple TV or Fire Stick, you can pull up Kingdom Purpose TV, and we're on every Monday nights at 9 p.m. Okay? So until next week, you guys be blessed.
You have the mindset for success. If you're looking for positivity,